Good evening, everyone. Hi, welcome. We have an audience that is global this evening, and you are here to join us for the book launch and a talk with author Bethany Webster about her book, Discovering the Inner Mother. My name is Jane Estes, and I am the co-founder and general manager of Lark and Owl Booksellers in Georgetown, Texas. And we could not be more thrilled to be a little co-host of this event. So if you've never been in our store, welcome virtually, and we hope we get to see all of you again in person soon. A teensy bit of housekeeping. Your books can be shipped, and an email will be going out to those of you who might have missed the address line in the Eventbrite sign up. So don't worry, your book will get to you. Okay, we'll reach out to you. This is a little bit of a painful day in this country, and it seems not okay to not acknowledge that. But books have been historically a source of power and solace. And I hope that that's what we can all take away from this evening. We're sure to be inspired. And here at Lark and Owl Booksellers, it's very important to us to create community. And through the pandemic, we have been able to create community even virtually. So welcome to all of you. And let me introduce our guests so that we can get started and you can enjoy your evening. So with us, as I mentioned, will be Bethany Webster, but interviewing her and in conversation is Leslie Ariola Hillenbrand, who is a first-generation non-Black Chicana with Raramuri lineage. She is a mother to 3 biracial children and a certified parent coach with over 13 years of experience. Leslie shares her medicine by offering coaching, workshops, support, and advocacy for Latinx, Chicanx families locally, nationally, and internationally via Latinx parenting. Leslie's vision is of a movement rooted in children's rights, social and racial justice, the individual and collective practice of nonviolence and reparenting, intergenerational and ancestral healing, cultural sustenance, and the active decolonization of oppressive practices in our families toward liberation. Thank you, Leslie, for joining us. She'll be with us in a few moments. But first, Bethany Webster, who is here on her book launch the day after her book dropped. Bethany is a writer, transformational coach, and international speaker. Holding both bachelor's and master's degrees in psychology, she worked in academia and medical communications before deciding to focus her work on the exploration of the mother wound. Building on the insights she'd gained through research and over 20 years as a client in-depth psychotherapy, she began blogging about the mother wound in 2013 and quickly experienced worldwide demand for her work. Bethany Webster has presented her work on the inner mother at renowned retreat centers as well as to audiences around the globe. Webster lives in Western Massachusetts. Welcome, Bethany. We're so happy you're here this evening.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Lark and Owl Booksellers. Thank you, Jane. And thank you to Main Street Books in Davidson as well. And I also want to thank, all of you here tonight with me. This is such a special night, and you all are a special group to be here. You've all ordered the book already, and you've, decided to be here with me tonight to celebrate the book. So it's really special to have you all here with me tonight on this really special time. I just also want to thank some special people that helped make this possible. I'd like to thank my editors, Cassie Jones and Emma Brody, as well as my agents, Tara Schallberg and Meg Thompson. And of course, Eliza, my publicist at HarperCollins, for helping this event to come together. And also to William Morrow, my publisher. So it's really, this event is a culmination of so much love and hard work. And so I'm really excited to spend this next hour with you. And my hope is that you all have some kind of big insight tonight, some shift in our conversation. I'm so excited that we have Leslie here with us tonight from Latinx Parenting. She's a fantastic influencer in the parenting space and decolonization work, so in alignment with this work of healing the mother wound. So we're going to have a fantastic night, and I'm so excited that you're all here. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to jump in right now and just do a little talk about the book. You know, the book came out yesterday. I couldn't be more thrilled. I don't know, some of you might have the book already. If you haven't yet, I have to tell you, it's a gorgeous piece of, you know, physically the book is gorgeous. I'm so happy with it. And I can't wait for you all to get your copies and to hear what you're, you know, thinking about the book, what your impressions are. Some of you might be new to my work. Maybe you followed me for years, and some of you might be brand new to the work that I do. But I think you're going to love what the book has. It's really an interweaving of my own personal story, a lot of which I've never shared publicly before in a lot of detail. So you get to hear my story and why I'm doing this work, how I got here. And also it has a whole teaching portion. So each chapter is really divided into two parts. So you're going to get my voice telling my own story, and then you're going to get more of the research and the insights that are going to really support you. I'm also happy to say that at the end of each chapter, we've got questions for reflection. So you can start putting some of this work into action in your own life immediately. And I have to say, you know, what we're going through right now, some might say, well, wow, this is an interesting time to have a book come out, right? At the, 2020 just ended. We've been living through some of the most unprecedented shifts in our country and in the world with the pandemic. So many of us have been living through, in quarantine. We've seen unprecedented income inequality. And also, racism has come up. All of these injustices are coming into our awareness more strongly, I think, than ever in our history. We're being confronted with so much on a collective level. And on top of that, we're being confronted so much on the inside with kind of the roots of some of these things within our own lives. So we might be confronted lately with repeating patterns in our relationships, with our own children, with our careers. So a lot is coming up for us right now at this particular moment. And even tonight, what we're witnessing in Washington, D.C., unprecedented things happening. So we're living through a crisis, and in many ways, it's overwhelming, isn't it? It's a lot. But I actually think this is the most perfect time. I don't think there could be a more perfect time for this book or for this event. In a way, it's kind of all unfolded quite perfectly. What the book really boils down to, it's really looking at the ways that the suffering and the division that we see out in the world has its roots deep within us. I talk about patriarchy a lot, and the reason why is, patriarchy is really a word that describes this cultural atmosphere that so many of us for generations have been brought up in. And the way I define patriarchy is really general and broad. It's more like this feeling of power over, right? Power over. And for us as women in particular, we experience this, as daughters, as little girls, and then of course in school, religion, all of us suffer from patriarchy, whether we're men or women. And men and women can both embody those patriarchal values and behaviors of power over. I also think of, I think it's Kate Millett, the feminist from the second wave. She said that the family is patriarchy's chief institution. And what did she mean by this? She's really saying that in our families is where this transfer of values really happens, where we learn power over, and the mother wound, and you're going to read a lot about the mother wound in the book. It's really about, for us as women, it's not really about our mothers in the end. It's really about how our needs for love, safety, and belonging, those core human needs, how those get blended with patriarchy, which is that power over. So it's really this intersection between attachment needs and culture. And so in the book, what I'm trying to do is help make that connection where we can see that these roots of these division and the suffering we see on a collective level, it lives in us. So the exciting thing about the book, and my goal is really, in moments you might feel triggered by the book, you might feel confronted by the book, but ultimately the book is really meant to inspire you and to be a catalyst for your unprecedented growth and transformation. It's really inspiring for me to think tonight of all of us here on this call and how each one of us, represents a line of women going back through history, right? If you think about each of our mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, there's a line of women behind us, right? Going back to the beginning of time. And we are the ones that are here at this crucial historic moment, having the tools, more awareness than any other generations before us, right? So we really stand now at this amazing precipice. I think it's an amazing time to be alive. I don't think there's ever been a time where humans have been as aware as we are now of our emotional needs, of the need for boundaries, the need for equality, the need for the fact that we know now that we have an inner child, right? So I think we're at a really, even though things are overwhelming and quite intense right now for so many of us, we also have so many opportunities for growth, for transformation, and momentum of a new kind of world. And so in the book, this book is really about kind of birthing a new world, a new paradigm through our own inner landscape. And the work what that is it's really creating inner safety. And I talk about that in the book of how to create an inner mothering practice. How do we mother that little girl inside of us, right? Who is still living in those patriarchal patterns that we inherited and internalized. We didn't have any choice as little girls, right? But to inherit what we learned from our mothers and our fathers and the wider culture. So this is just so exciting to me. And it's really about giving birth to ourselves, birthing a new world, and supporting one another in this work. We can't do this alone. None of us can do this on our own. It's really about getting that support, having the tools, having the awareness, and moving forward with what we have. I think now I'm looking at the time, I feel like I should just move forward with the little reading. I'm going to read a little passage right now from the introduction that I think is kind of encapsulates this a bit more. All right, here we go. So this is like maybe the second to last page from the end of the introduction. All right, when I speak of the mother wound in the context of patriarchal cultures, I'm referring to the pervasive patriarchal capitalist cultures rooted in colonization and destruction of the earth that have come to dominate much of the world. This book, describing my own personal story and observations, is intended to serve merely as an opening for a loud chorus of women's voices from a wide variety of backgrounds, races, and cultures to emerge and to share their lived experiences of the mother wound. While this book is focused on women, I think that anyone who reads this book will gain something of value. For those women who are mothers, I invite you to read this from the perspective of yourself as a daughter, right? Because as daughters, that's how we received this messaging of that women are less than, don't rock the boat, don't have needs, don't have boundaries. So these patriarchal messages that we receive, we get them as daughters, right? So we heal the mother wound from the perspective of a daughter. And for moms, as you gain insights about how you were raised and the impact this had on you, how you show up as a mother is likely to shift in powerful ways, enabling a stronger and healthier bond with your own children. And we'll talk about this more with Leslie when we get to that part of the talk tonight. So going on with the reading, this book moves from the personal to the cultural, beginning with the discussion of what the mother wound is, how it manifests, and the kind of power dynamics that it feeds on. From there, we delve into the process of addressing the trauma within your own family, the inner work this requires, and finally, the changes you can expect to see as you make your way to the other side. At the conclusion of each chapter is a set of questions for reflection, offered to assist you in processing the material in the context of your own experience. For those who read the book and want more, you can check more about my website for more info. And then I kind of say, ultimately, healing the mother wound is not really about our mothers in the end. It's about women embracing ourselves and our gifts without shame. It's about expanding our capacity for holding and transforming emotional pain into consciousness and awareness. It's about restoring an ancient imbalance created by patriarchy. No longer do we unconsciously feel ourselves to be abandoned children in despair, projecting our unconscious pain all around us. Healing the mother wound allows us to become the loving witness to the beloved child within, and to embody the benevolent feminine consciousness that has been lying dormant within many of us. Intergenerational healing requires that we learn how to embody the very things that we never received ourselves, to be the loving presence that we longed for ourselves, the unconditional, benevolent presence that's there no matter what. That's that inner safety piece. To realize that within us, we have an untapped reservoir that we can link with at any time. And this work takes practice, right? It takes practice to create this. We become not only the holder, but the held, the longing, and the longed for, a collective vessel for something new and unprecedented to be born into this world. All right, so that's kind of there's another section after that in the introduction, but that kind of gives you a little bit of the intro of what to expect from the book and where we're going with all this. So that was my reading. I'm just looking at the time, and I think it might be a good time for us, actually. I can't believe this, I'm on time. For me to invite Leslie into the conversation, and we can talk a bit about what Leslie does and in her work. Hi, Leslie, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. She's probably on mute still. So Leslie, I would love for you to maybe start us off talking a bit about the work that you do at Latinx Parenting and what you thought of the book as well. Leslie was one of my first reviewers. She read the book and she reviewed it, and she wrote this amazing review. But I'd love to just hear a bit from you, Leslie, about like what you do so everybody can understand your work and also how you resonated with the book.
Yeah, I am so grateful, first of all, to be in conversation with you. I see you as like just one of my heroes and a mentor and like a teacher. I've been following you. I think I mentioned this in my initial email to you that I've been following you for like a decade almost. And back when you were, having like your free little mini ebook, and I was just like, this speaks to me so much because I have a glaring mother wound, as many of us do, right? Like it's been so clear to me that I wanted to mother differently. I have a almost 9-year-old child. And when I got pregnant with her, I knew how I didn't want to mother, but I didn't know how I did want to mother, right? And I didn't know that the foundation of mothering is the mothering of the self. I didn't know that until I started following you and really learning from you. And I have a mentor as well who has been really helpful with it. The book was the culmination, I think, of all of your work. Like, I think that everything in the book speaks to your experience for the last decade, even longer, right? And I'm just so grateful for your vulnerability, Bethany, because there's so many pieces in the book where you just share of yourself so openly and so honestly. And so I do want to tell people, like, this is not just like a how-to manual. This is how you feel the mother wound. And I'm standing up here, like, you have done the work within yourself. And so I just feel really honored to get that piece of your story. So much of your story is in this book and the way that you frame things. And so for me, it's been really healing. I think for my, I will go into what I do, but first of all, I just wanted to share
appreciations.
Thank you. yeah, and I'll go back to what I loved about the book, but my work is mostly with Latinx or Latino parents, and we talk about the entire gamut of Latinx parenting, from gender roles to racism to just everything that we have come to grapple with. I'm in an interesting position because, and like many of us, I'm I'm kind of straddling two cultures. I was born here. My parents were born in Mexico. And so it's been really interesting to contextualize the work that I've been doing around the mother wound with the cultural piece, being a Latina. And people in my community, I think, are very, very hungry for this information, for this liberation. And so as I've been more and more incorporating the reparenting work, the inner bonding work, which you're well, familiar with, and it's just been really powerful to see the transformations that have happened for me personally, but also for so many people who think that they're going to learn about parenting.
Right, right.
Like, how do I do this? What do I, what's the easy fix? What's the solution?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it can be really scary for some of us to acknowledge how much of a role our healing has in the way that we want to parent, but it's also incredibly liberating, right? I find this incredibly freeing, this work that you're doing, this work that we're all kind of doing. And as a mother, I know that this is going to be impacting my child, my three children, the way that they grow up, the way that they see me, not being this martyr, having these intentions for healing all of my mother wounds, and that will carry on, exponentially and have ripple effects. So that's just a little bit about, how I incorporate.
Can I ask you a question? Because you brought up such an awesome point. I love how you talked about how you see that transformation in parents, like that part of like learning to be a different parent is learning to parent yourself. And most people don't expect that. And I notice too, with the people that I work with, that there's often this feeling, especially as women, because we're so overwhelmed in the culture, we're so saddled with so much, that initially women can feel like, oh no, it's one more thing for me to do, is to mother myself. But then that's usually, I find, a temporary period. And then if they stick with it, they get to a place where it's like, oh, wow, this is lightening my load. It's energizing. It's not actually a burden the way I thought it was. Do you see that kind of transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see it more as like a spectrum of like grief and celebration, right? And I talk about this a lot in my own work, that we're always like vacillating between grief and celebration, between the grief around, this is what I did not receive. This is the world that I grew up in that is not set up for me to succeed as a woman, as a mother. The grief around the systemic, conditions that have made it so that my mother is not able to mother me.
Right.
And so there's a lot of grief, and we can get really, we can feel that grief really heavy sometimes. And so I want to emphasize that. And I feel like your book is speaks to this and has so much to do with moving not away from the grief completely, but integrating it. As we move into a vision, as you speak of, as we move into celebration and holding both, right? And I feel like colonialism, like patriarchy, wants us to operate in these binaries, but we're refusing to operate in binaries. Like we're going to hold the grief, we're going to hold the celebration. And I find that for women, and I think for me working with mothers specifically, it can almost feel angering, I have to do this work, like I'm just so pissed. Why am I in this position? I have to do more. But you're right. I think that is a temporary state, and we may go back to that temporary state sometimes. But moving through it is so healing. We have to kind of go through our shadows and our wounds and our thorns to get to that other side of healing. And I love in the book about like riding the waves, like riding the waves of healing, instead of seeing it as like, this very linear path. It's more like you're riding the waves in the ocean. And I love that analogy.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you're so right about the whole grief piece. That grief is is such a big part of this. Collectively, we're witnessing so much pain and suffering in the world. And then in our own lives, we're feeling what we've inherited from our own families. And I think this is where the inner mothering work can really come in beautifully. It's like when the inner mother is like a living energy, right? That lives inside of us. She's a child that's trapped kind of at whatever level we didn't get our developmental needs met. And so we can get triggered, the parts of us that are in pain or feeling unloved can come out through anger or sadness. And so part of the work with the inner mothering is learning how to hold, to hold those moments with tenderness and to embrace them, to empathize, but then also to be fierce. And I think of inner mothering as being tender and fierce, right? So the tenderness of like empathizing, but not getting stuck in the grief, but also like being able to like set a boundary with the grief. Like, okay, we're going to focus on actually our freedom right now. We're not totally stuck right now. So it's kind of, that tenderness and fierceness is like riding that wave. And I think a lot of our mothers and great grandmothers, didn't have the support or the fortitude or the awareness to kind of move through some of these waves. They felt stuck, and they didn't, like in my family, there was a lot of addiction, a lot of early deaths, people in a lot of despair without a lot of tools. So it's like, it feels exciting to kind of honor grief, that grief is actually a healthy human function. And especially in the times we're living in, we got to make space for that. But also grief is part of freedom. This is something that I learned on my journey too. It's like, it took me so long to see that when grief comes up, it's not like something's wrong. It's like, this is actually me moving through the shit and going to a new place in my life. So you're so right. If we have the courage and the support to go into grief, there's always like this lightness that follows it.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned that lightness, and also the discipline in the inner mothering, right? Like, I feel like once you acknowledge that, okay, I'm not going to get my needs met by this external embodiment of a mother. I have my earth mother to support this process, right?
Yeah.
But just like, in regular mothering and in mothering my external child, there's validation, but then there's also a sense of like, okay, we're going to stay committed, right? We're going to stay disciplined to our healing and to our process. And so I think one of the aha moments for me that you have shared is the fact that it takes a while for our inner child to trust the inner mother, right? Because there has been so much broken trust for so many of us as children. And when I understood that piece, I understood where that anger came from.
Right.
And having to come back to our inner child and say, I know that you've had your heart broken so many times. I know that it's hard to trust adults. I know that I'm still learning this. I'm still learning how to care for you. There's just so much grace that is offered with the inner mothering process, where it's like, you're not going to just let, I sometimes share with the people in my groups, like, sometimes my inner child wants to scream and shout, and sometimes she wants to eat all the ice cream, and sometimes she wants to just like, slam a door, like my wounds come out. And people have said, like, let your inner child lead. And I'm like, do not let the inner child lead, let the inner mother lead.
Yes.
And hold that and bring in that, I hate to use the word discipline because people equate it with punishment nowadays, typically, but it is that guidance, and really holding some level of structure to this process has been really supportive. And you give a lot of structure in the book too.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. It is a balance. And I think what the kind of end goal is with, healing the mother wound and inner mothering work is we show up in the world differently. When the inner child feels safe, she becomes more integrated. And it's even true on a neuroscience level. Like, neuroscientists are realizing that as we heal trauma, we're actually building like more connections between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So the inner child and the inner mother are really like metaphors for brain, changing our brains to be more resilient. And as we show up as the inner mother is really this integration point, where if we stick with it, if we stick with the work, the child in us becomes integrated into the woman that we are. And so her playfulness, her joy, her creativity, that divine spark can suddenly be activated, right? But we can also be fierce. And I think this is something that I've seen a lot in the women especially that I privately coached, is that as women get used to feeling, as a child feels safe inside, this liberates the woman's power, the power. And this is one of the biggest manifestations of healing I've seen. Women just start standing up. They stop tolerating stuff that doesn't honor them. They walk away. They feel safe enough to say no to, relationships that aren't working, jobs that are sucking their life force energy, start their own businesses, do parenting differently. Like, there's an energy and also a fierceness. And I think we're living in a time where we need more of that female power, more of that female fierceness. And it's not possible if we don't do the work, right? Because sometimes, I know myself, I would just collapse into a little girl place, right? Sometimes my inner child would just take over, and I would be, feel really rejected, abandoned, or, go into a funk for days. But, through years of work, it's like I'm more able to show up as the inner mother, that sovereign. It's kind of this sovereign feeling where that no matter what happens in the world, and this is another piece I think that's important for right now, is no matter what happens out there in the world, that that you're okay, that ultimately you're safe. So it's this emotional safety that only we can create for ourselves, right? It's like only we can do that. But once we have enough of it, it's not like we become perfect and healed. There's always more. I'm healing every day. I'm in a lot of deep healing work actually myself right now, but it gets to this place where, it's like a sufficient level where that you're going to be all right. And there's a power to that.
Yeah. I think, it speaks to the ownership of your life, and owning what comes up for you, and releasing people for not being able to provide what only you could provide for yourself. I've noticed the changes in my relationship and in my with my partner, in freeing him from having to meet the needs of little Leslie.
Yeah.
I'm not going to expect you to come in and meet all of my needs. Like, that's not fair sometimes to our partners, right? And sometimes we project this onto our children too, and that's really unfortunate, because it's out of alignment with, I think, what we ultimately want for ourselves, which is that freedom. And so, it can be really scary. It can be really angering sometimes and confusing. And I think when people read the book, I'm fortunate that I've been doing this work for a few years now too, but I can see how, if you are not used to the language, right, how it can feel like a little bit funny and a little bit like, how do I do this? And so it's interesting, in the groups that I run, some of the mothers will say, I haven't been keeping consistent with my modules. So, it basically am I bad is the question.
Aww.
Right. And it's like, no, well, part of the reparenting, part of the inner mother work is to bring fluidity to it, is to just trust your process. Is to trust that everything that is presenting itself to you is an opportunity to go deeper and to heal and to discover the inner mother. Like, I don't know how else to say it, but that's what it is.
Thank you so much for that point. That's a really good one, because, in this capitalist, racist, patriarchal culture, we're constantly taught that we need to be done, healed, perfect. There's so many insidious ways that we can relate to ourselves that way. And I notice a lot of the women in my community as well feel a sense of relief when I'm like, you get to go at your own pace. You get to follow your own, there's a structure here for you, but you're not like beholden to it. You can learn to kind of learn the language of your own being. And as women, I think that's what we're yearning for, is like the container for safety for that, the permission for that, more models of that. And the space to experiment with that. Like, what does it mean to not be hard on myself and to just follow what feels good today? Or, there's a lot of just new ways of being as women that haven't been modeled to us by our mothers, our great-grandmothers, or in the wider culture. So I like to say that healing the mother wound requires us to be rebels. It requires us to do things differently and to be uncomfortable. But it's like a muscle that we can keep, working. And as we get into it more and more, we start to feel the liberation. So I think a lot of this, like you said, it's about sticking with it. It's about committing. And we can always recommit, right? Like we fall down, we don't touch the work for a while. We can always come back. And I think that's also part of the inner mothering work is a lot of us as little girls felt like no one came back for us. There might have been an event in our childhood or a series of chronic events where we felt abandoned. We felt unloved, unlovable. And so we abandon ourselves in ways that replicate that original abandonment, right? We're even rewarded for abandoning ourselves. And in patriarchy, we had to fragment ourselves. We had to suppress certain parts and we had to accentuate others. Like we got distorted through the culture and the traumatic families that we grew up in. So part of this work is like welcoming home all those parts that went into shadow, that feel like they're not good enough, that they're too big, they're too loud, they have too many needs, they're too angry. And in the inner mothering work, we welcome all of ourselves. And ultimately, this work is about love. This is all about love. And as we can learn to love ourselves and support one another as women in this self-love, like this, it's really radical. And I think as more and more of us do it, this is kind of my vision for the book, is that the world outside of us is going to transform as more and more of us women learn to mother ourselves, have more models of what that means to be a sovereign, fierce and loving woman who loves herself. Like just imagine the female power that's going to be unleashed.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's really, it's this vision, right? It's like the vision of the paradigm that you speak of. Like this is what we're moving towards. And then there's this other paradigm, like this patriarchal, capitalistic, colonialist,
right,
existence that we've all been swimming in. And I think this book and your work and doing the inner mothering work has given us this lens for identifying it and then saying, no, I'm actually not going to participate in that.
Right.
And so, but I find that I have to be really self-compassionate with that process, because if I am, and as mothers, as women, we do perpetuate patriarchy. As you write about, we perpetuate all of these systems. And so easily we could get trapped into the cycle of like, oh, I did it again. I abandoned myself again, and it can just add this like other layer of guilt and shame.
Totally.
And so it's like, no, fuck that. Like, I'm not going to participate in that either.
I think
so I love the grace that you just presented. Like, you can just come back. Like, it's okay. You did it. Fine. Let's go back, to the intention and to the vision.
Yes, absolutely. And I know that feeling you're talking about. And I've been there, and I know I've seen so many women there too. It's like, oh, I was doing so well and look where I am. And an important part too is like, we have to repeat these things over and over. And with each time we do, we actually have more awareness, right? Like there's something powerful when women, we can witness ourselves in a patriarchal pattern, but we see it as it's happening. And if we can witness the suffering we're creating for others, for ourselves, how it doesn't serve us, we need to actually go through things many, many times and really build that awareness to a point where we can truly discharge or dispose of them. So even when we repeat things on our path, there's always wisdom being gained, and like you said earlier, Leslie, our paths are all unique. Everybody's path is different with its own timing, its organic flow. And we can trust that. And that's part of that whole birthing the female power, is trusting our path, because it has a wisdom and a timing that we can rest in that. Yeah.
I find that this is like ancestral work for me also. Just like I'm not only healing my lineage, like my descendants, right? Like I'm not only doing this work for them, I'm doing this for all of the mothers before me that were not able to use their voice, that were not able to have these conversations, that were not able to stand up for themselves. And I have so much compassion for those mothers that still often are stuck, right? And died without being able to access that freedom. And I will die without getting to the goal.
Right.
Like I
Totally.
will. We all, I think we're so far from where we need to be, but it's not necessarily about even getting to that goalpost in this lifetime. It's just about doing the work that needs to be done, and really embodying our divine assignments, whatever that looks like for us.
Totally. And I love how you brought together, like, yeah, we're healing the future, but also the past. And it really spreads out. It's interesting. I've had moments in my journey where I can almost feel my ancestors very palpably. Like there's something mystical to this. There is some kind of spiritual component as well. When we go deep into, when we are brave enough to face our own pain, it's just powerful what can happen. I think we connect more deeply to life itself, because this is a really universal human experience we're talking about. And so it's really, I think, the most important work that we can do in our lives, this legacy of disrupting cycles, stopping the cycles of trauma and dysfunction and patriarchy, that we are the women who get to say, I'm going to do whatever it takes to stop these cycles with me. And I'm just I'm committed to that path. And like you, Leslie, I know I'm going to die with more work to do, but it almost doesn't matter. It's just like the path feels so nourishing just being on it.
Yeah.
There's a certain kind of nutrient, like nourishment that comes from just continuing on.
Yeah. Because we're committed, like there's just this, there's this vision that we hold. And I find that that's what's nourishing to me, because people get really bogged down, and I have found myself in those moments too, where I'm looking at the world around me and I'm just like, this is too much.
Yeah.
This is overwhelming. What's happening even today, is just, it's too much. And so the work of inner mothering is so timely. We talked about this a little bit yesterday when we did the pre-call, that this conversation, this book is so timely for this moment, because it is about bringing back that safety, and mothering the self and saying, what, actually, we're going to take care of ourselves. We don't have to be on social media right now if it's not nourishing to our nervous system. We don't have to turn the news on. We know what's happening out there. Mm-hmm. But you know what, you would probably benefit from a nice little nap or a nice little bath, and let's actually look over here for a little while, make sure that our cup is full, and then we'll go back and fight some more. Yeah. So I just find that this is so perfect for the time that we're living in, and so grateful for you.
Oh, thank you so much, Leslie. I'm so grateful for you too, and all the work that you're doing. And it's so inspiring to me. And this actually seems like a perfect moment. Maybe we should go to Q&A. I know a lot of you have been in the chat, and thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this conversation. I hope it's been inspiring to you, and would love to. Yeah, we're going to answer a few more questions before our time is over.
Yeah. Okay, this is a good one. What about men? Are there father wounds? Do men have mother wounds? I'm sure
Great question.
I'm sure you've never heard that before.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, men have mother wounds, big time. And I'll speak to this, but there's also an article on my website where I go into a lot of detail. I think it's called Men in the Mother Wound: The Missing Link in Misogyny. But basically, little boys, when they're born, their process is, they're conditioned by the patriarchy to suppress their feminine side, their emotionality, their need for, softness, rest, their need for connection. They're conditioned and reinforced. I know in my family too, for the men in my family, this was the case. And so they have to suppress and distort, and they suffer from this lack of connection. And especially, the mothers, for both boys and girls, mothers are the most primary parent. That's just how we're set up, right? Physiologically, is our mothers are the primary ones. So mothers can play a big role in how that process happens. So men absolutely have mother wounds, and this is such crucial work for them as well. But I do focus mostly on women, because I think women, with the gender difference, it's like men are like reinforced to not be with their mothers, to stop identifying with the feminine. That's kind of how patriarchy works. It's like devalue, women are inferior, your feminine side is inferior. But with women, it's like we identify with our mothers. There's no initiation process that says you're now your own woman, or you're now, and I talk about this a bit in the book as well, that, so yeah, this is something that's an urgent, I would say even urgent need for men to look at. So if you want, absolutely. I think men would benefit a lot from this book, to be honest with you. And I have a lot of men who follow me too. So yeah, it's super urgent for men too.
Yeah, there's many men, I wouldn't say many men, but many men in my life where I'm just like, ooh, I see a mother wound emerging. I don't know how you would, feel if I said that out loud to you, but I see it, All right. So here is a question. How do you make space for grief, and how do you process it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think my grief process has kind of evolved over the years, but I would say it's, grieving has a lot of, and everybody's different, but I think the main thing with grief is, number one, inner permission, giving yourself, an approach to your grief that you just kind of saying, I'm going to welcome it. I'm going to welcome my grief. I'm going to make space for it as much as possible. That's the biggest step I think you can make, because I think a lot of us in this culture, we're conditioned to see, oh, I'm sad, as like push through it, put it aside, don't look at it, or judging yourself, like I'm sad, there's something wrong with me, I'm not there yet. So just the act of saying, I'm going to welcome my grief, I'm going to make space for it, I'm going to make time for it, whether that's journaling. Journaling has been central to my process. I write every single day in a journal. It's kind of like breathing to me. It's helped me. My writing started from journaling. So I think if I would encourage people to journal on a daily basis. If you feel grief coming up and it's not like totally uncensored, just write, this is what I'm feeling today. Why is this important? I think it's like it develops that relationship within that's not dependent on other people. It's just like, I'm my own person, my own source of comfort. And then you can look at your journaling again later and be like, oh, wow, I had that insight and that insight. And over time, you can track yourself and start to have some pride in, your journey. So I think journaling is crucial, I would say, but also giving yourself time to rest, time to cry, time to be. It's kind of a really holy process, I would say. Leslie, would you share anything?
I mean, there are so many, I think the journaling is so key. I've also found myself, moving through my grief and dancing through my grief, cooking through my grief, running through my grief. I have a friend who, she's going to do this whole, she goes by Latinx grief, similar to Latinx parenting, Latinx grief. She's having this whole challenge soon around moving through your grief, because she's a runner, or running through your grief. And so there's just so many, I feel like so much of this work is also like permission to reconnect to our bodies, right? Because our intuition has been tangled up somewhat. And so really understanding like what our body is needing in that moment is part of that inner mothering process. And sometimes I don't want to write. Sometimes I want to dance, sometimes I want to go outside with my, with no shoes on and just like feel the earth under my feet and connect to my earth mother as I connect to my inner mother, and so there's you do speak a lot on ways to do that in the book. So I encourage people to hop to that, section whenever they want suggestions. But
I think there's an actual whole chapter on grief in here.
I was going to say it's a good one, but all of them are good ones. So, okay. So here is another
let's take maybe one or two. Okay.
So maybe this will be the last one.
Okay.
Okay. Let me see. Okay. Did you do anything different in healing your misperceptions of self derived from organized religion than you did from your family dynamics? Is that clear?
Yeah.
And here's the second part of the question.
Okay.
I think it'll help the first part. Do you recommend anything additional or different from those healing from patriarchal constructs indoctrinated from religion and childhood programming? So I think that this just speaks to like the religious factor in us having to kind of deconstruct, what's true for us.
Absolutely.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I grew up Catholic, so there was, of course, tons of misogyny, and I actually remember, I have this really strong memory of being in CCD. It's like a Catholic education, and there was a priest, and I remember I had read something in the Bible, because I actually was quite into religion as a kid, for help, because I was like, help me, God. That was part of it for me. But I remember seeing this passage in the Bible that was like, women's goodness is always worse than men's badness. And I was like a preteen, and I was like, what the hell is this? So I remember confronting a priest, and I was like, what does this mean? I'm not less than. It's baked in. Religion, just like all these other institutions, our inferiority is baked into it. So part of the process is just like with our families, right? The family is an institution, just like religion's an institution. So I kind of think of them almost as like facets of the same thing. So I would say, process whatever subjugation or suffering you experienced from your religion. I would journal a ton about that. Like, how was that enacted? How did you experience that? And how did that contribute to your self-concept? The more I think you can piece that apart and become aware of it, the less control it has over you, and the more you can see it as something that was imposed on you, whatever shame. I know for me, I experienced a lot of shame from the Catholic philosophy as a woman, that your body's dirty, that you're bad, that you're inferior, that God's this white judgmental male, just feeling alienated as a female. And so I think just fleshing that out is and maybe even reading some materials from people who have recovered from those religions could be helpful to feel more separate and more empowered about that. Leslie, would you add more to that?
I think for me, working with Latina mothers primarily, this comes up a lot because so many of us grew up Catholic, and I experienced that same shame that you speak of, and still that some of that disconnect between us and our mothers, if they're living now, is that religious piece, right? And how we are seen as, we may be believing that we are liberating ourselves, but they see us as sinners.
Right.
So there's just this like complex, and it's very layered. I know I picked a complicated question, but I feel like
it's a good one.
Like it's the water that we swim in, just like patriarchy, as you said, just like capitalism, just like colonialism, just like all of these structures that are power over. And so we navigate as best we can, but then we also remember the truth about ourselves and the truth about our sacredness, regardless of what dogma says.
Right.
So that's kind of how it's like, well, if I'm going to, and actually as a child, because I went to Catholic school, K through 12. And so I find that I feel grateful for the gift of imagining that there was this bearded white man in the clouds. I feel like I still have that imagination, but now I can imagine my inner mother, coming in and holding me. And so there's this piece of like, well, if I could feel protected at that time, then I can feel protected now, but it's actually a more real protection because it's me.
Right.
I'm holding myself. So.
Wow, that's so powerful what you just said. That's so powerful. Yeah, it's like you're holding yourself is so much more powerful and real than the Catholic image of the man, the judgmental man. There's no holding there. It's more judgment. So it's like, like you said, finding our truth. And these are the ways that we...
the God within, right? It's like, it's not God, it's actually the goddess within.
Truth. Yes, we feel the goddess within, and that's radical, but that's real. And that's what this is all about, right? This dismantling, like as we look at how religion has impacted us, how education, the ways that patriarchy has impacted us, the more we can examine it, become aware of it, then we can dispose of it and turn towards the truth within. And that's really what the book is about. It's like, as we uncover all these layers, we pull them off, we get to the center of our truth, and then we can start living that truth. And the inner mothering is what helps create that safety so that we really can live it and embody it through practice. So absolutely. I think this is a great moment to maybe end on that.
Yeah, I don't want to, because I love you and I want to.
I love you too. This has been so fun.
I think we should just keep going. I think we should just,
I think a lot of people would be in favor of that. That was a great conversation, you guys. Really. I mean, I think we all could listen a lot longer, but you told me to stop it at 8:00, so that's what I'm doing.
Thank you, Jane.
I want to tell you, Leslie and Bethany, thank you so much again. Thank you all for joining us. I want to thank William Morrow and Harper Collins and Eliza and our Main Street Books friends in North Carolina. And in closing, please follow these wonderful women on their newsletters and social media. If you want to find out more, get Bethany's book. Yours will be shipped to you. With those of you who signed up this evening, we'll send an email out bright and early in the morning so everybody can know. And the link to this will stay up for a little while, so you can come back and watch it if you want to.
Yeah, Jane, I was just going to add for everybody, and thank you so much, by the way, everyone, for being here with us. This has been an amazing night, and it's been so much fun to share it with you. And because of everything that's happening in the world tonight, literally, we're going to leave the replay up, we decided, through the weekend, so that if you want to watch this again, or if you didn't get to it, it's going to be up. If you had to miss part of it for whatever reason, you're going to have plenty of time to watch it again or catch up with it.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say two more things, actually. One is that there is so much community around this work that you have created, Bethany.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I want to just let people know that the Facebook group is available. I've gained so much knowledge and community being a part of that. And then also, if you are constantly driving, you can also get the audiobook on Audible.
Yeah.
So I recommend I read your book, hard copy, but also the Audible is available for you to listen as you're doing dishes or whatever.
Yes. Thank you so much for mentioning that, Leslie. Yeah, I have a free Facebook group if you guys want to join and continue this conversation. Thank you so much again, Leslie. I really loved our conversation so much. And Jane, thanks again. This has been so much fun.
Well, let's do it in person next time. How about?
Okay. Yes.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.